When it comes to your money, certain habits and behaviors can negatively impact your bottom line. In financial terms, your bottom line essentially means your profit. Whether it's what's left after you've allocated your income to expenses and spending in the month via your budget, or if you're calculating your net worth by deducting your total debts from your total assets. Either way, we want our bottom line number to be as high as possible. The more profit, the more we can grow our wealth. Unfortunately, certain toxic money habits can reduce our bottom line number. It can happen in small, sneaky ways, or it can happen in big, drastic ways. Regardless, it's important to know what those bad habits are, especially since they can have the opposite effect of what we want. In this episode, I'm sharing 5 toxic money habits to break as soon as you possibly can. Now, I'm sharing these 5 toxic money habits with you so you can do something about them if they apply to you. When you know better, you can do better. So let's dive in. The first toxic money habit is overspending on non-necessities. This toxic money habit probably comes as no surprise, but we've all been guilty of it. Spending more than you need to on non-necessities is one of the quickest ways to go broke, drain your savings, or wind up deep in debt. And all of those things can impact your bottom line negatively. Now, I don't want you to think that you can't spend any money on non-necessities because you definitely can. The goal is just to make sure that they are factored into your budget. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, then you know how important it is to me that your budget includes things that you love and enjoy. However, they need to be included in moderation because we have some goals that we're working towards. In City Girl Savings Podcast episode 71, My Budget Non-Negotiables, I share some of the non-necessities I've added to my budget. I don't feel guilty spending my money on those things because they truly bring me joy and they're already accounted for. So take some time to think about the things that bring you joy and allocate a reasonable amount of money to those things in your budget. That way, you can still feel like you have just some room to enjoy your life with, but you're not spending money you shouldn't be. I do want to add that while factoring in things you want into your budget is effective, you still have to be mindful of your spending. You may only have $150 a month budgeted for whatever you want, but if what you want costs $300, you'll still have to practice restraint. I mean, I wish it was as simple as dedicating more money in your budget to the things you want, but that's not really how money management works. So review your budget, make sure you factor in things that you enjoy, even if they aren't a necessity. Do so in moderation, and you can work to break this toxic money habit. The next toxic money habit is constantly pulling money out of savings. Now, the key word here is constantly. You can pull from your savings for emergencies or whenever you've reached a specific goal. However, if you are constantly pulling from savings because you failed to budget, you overspent, or you just didn't have a good handle on your bills and expenses, that needs to stop. I know I've talked about this before on the podcast, but it bears repeating. The entire purpose of a savings account is to keep the money in there, saved for a specific goal or a specific purpose. If you constantly pull money out of your savings account, you are defeating the purpose. Not to mention, you're actually training your brain to think it's okay to pull money out of savings for any little thing. It is not okay to do that. That is not the purpose of a savings. So instead, I want you to learn how to properly budget your money so you only pull from savings when you truly need to. Now, sometimes people can constantly pull money out of savings because they just have too much going in there in the first place. Saving too much money can be a problem. And I'm sure you might be scratching your head thinking, well, how is saving too much money a problem? Like, that's more money going into savings, but the reality is, if you are putting too much money into savings and you don't have enough to cover your bills and expenses and spending for the pay period, you're just going to have to pull that money right back out of savings. And again, that's defeating the purpose of your savings account, number one, but it's training your brain to think it's okay to constantly pull from savings. So we want to make sure we're not putting too much money into savings in the first place. And to make sure of that, this is where your budget will come in handy. To make sure you're not saving too much money, review your budget to determine a reasonable amount of money to save every single month and save that amount. Now, if you end up making more money or if you end up spending less than you planned, that's when you can add extra into your savings account. But we don't want to do that too soon. We want to make sure you have what you need to get through the pay period or the month, and then anything that's left over can be saved. Now, when you are reviewing your budget to make sure that you have a reasonable amount that can be saved, I want you to make sure it's an amount that you won't miss, or it's an amount that won't impact your other needs. So, for example, if after all of your bills are accounted for the pay period and you have $500 left, but you haven't allocated any of your income to groceries, gas, or even discretionary money, it would not be realistic for you to assume that you could save that full $500 and that's it. Right? You have to make sure you're thinking about everything that you need to spend your money on in the pay period. Then whatever is left over after everything is accounted for, that can be put into savings. The next toxic money habit I want you to break as soon as possible is accruing interest on credit card balances. So anyone who has been in credit card debt, myself included here, understands this. Accruing interest on credit cards or any other debt balances is a huge problem. Not only are the interest charges typically outrageous, but they make it that much harder for you to actually pay the balances down. Now, oftentimes, overspending is what leads to credit card debt. However, I don't want you to think that just because you're in debt, it's because you were overspending and you couldn't control yourself. Other things like unexpected expenses with no savings can add to those debt balances. But if you can fix the toxic money habits that drive up credit card balances, so overspending, not having a savings, not having a game plan if something unexpected comes up, if you can fix those things, you should be able to avoid growing interest payments. Now, if you do find yourself in high interest debt, I want you to stop using your cards immediately and get yourself on a plan that helps you pay your balances down. Ideally, using a method like the snowball method. Now, it will not happen overnight. I wish it was a quick process, but it just doesn't work like that. And depending on how much debt you actually have, it can take a long time. That's okay. Slow and steady can be an effective strategy for paying down your debt. You just have to commit to it. You have to stay consistent and you have to have a plan. Now, remember how I had talked about saving too much money as a problem? Well, I also want to address that contributing or paying too much towards your debt to pay it off faster can also be a problem. So if you are putting money towards your debt that ideally needs to go to bills, expenses, and spending, you're going to end up using your credit cards because you don't have any extra money to get you through the pay period. So just like saving too much money is a problem, putting too much towards your debt is a problem. And to solve that problem, you review your budget. You make sure everything that you need to spend your money on is accounted for. And then whatever is left over, that can be applied to your debt. Now, if you are working to pay off debt, I want you to grab a copy of my free debt repayment checklist to just help guide you along the way. I will link to it in the show notes. But one thing we got to do, and one thing that is in your control right now, is to stop using your credit cards, get yourself on a budget, and if necessary, work to control your spending so that you don't have to use credit cards. The next toxic money habit I want you to break is trying to keep up with the Joneses. Now, if you know my story, you know that when I was 18, I left Austin, Texas for school or college in Los Angeles, California. And that's really where a lot of my bad money behaviors started. I mean, living in LA, trying to keep up with the Joneses is pretty much the norm. And as a broke college student, I did my best to compete, and it left me with tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt. So trying to keep up with the Joneses is never an effective strategy or habit. And 9 times out of 10, the Joneses are broke. But even if they aren't, right? First off, we wouldn't know that. We don't have insight into their bank accounts or credit card statements or anything like that. Whether they're broke or not, trying to keep up with other people is a losing battle. Because not only do you fail to understand what that person really has or how they can spend their money. I mean, again, we don't know what their bank accounts look like. We don't know what their income, their debt situation looks like. So take that out of the equation. You are also basing your own happiness off of what someone else has or does. That is not a recipe for long-term success. And I totally understand that social media makes it very, very hard to just be happy and content and grateful with what you have. But we got to try, okay? We got to make this work. The influencers that you follow, the celebrities you follow, anyone you follow who has more than you have, I mean, again, you don't really know what their situation looks like. They may be broke. They may be in debt. They may be getting $1 million paycheck or getting funding from other sources that you have no clue about. So comparing your life or trying to live a life similar to someone else's will only lead to unhappiness and make you feel less than. So I really want you to learn to appreciate what you have and work to obtain the things you want most out of life. That's going to help you break this toxic money habit. And it all comes back to gratitude. So being grateful for what you do have, but also setting goals and working towards the things that truly matter to you as a person, as an individual, not because someone else has something or someone else believes something. It has to be true to you. That will make it worth working towards. The final toxic money habit I want you to break as soon as you possibly can is spending money before you get it. Now, we have all been there, planning out how to spend an upcoming bonus, a tax refund, or whatever financial windfall of money before we actually get it. And some of us may have gone as far as actually spending the money before it hits our account. Do not do that. It's a recipe for disaster. What if you don't get as much as you planned? What if something else comes up and that money needs to go towards that other thing? There are so many things that can go wrong when you spend money before you get it. I was actually just talking to a client about this yesterday. I mean, she has some trips in the works, and her game plan for funding those trips is using an upcoming bonus. Now, she didn't spend the money before she got it, which is great. However, there are other things that could happen or could come up just based on her situation that bonus money could be leveraged for. So it's important to make sure that you're not overextending yourself, especially when extra money is in the picture. Spending money before you get it can have some terrible repercussions. It may force you to add to your debt. It may force you to cancel plans or go back on your word. It may force you to make some decisions you don't want to make, all because you couldn't control yourself, all because you couldn't take a beat, wait until that money hits your account, and then assess what to do with it or take action with it. Now, let me just clarify here. There is absolutely nothing wrong with having a plan for extra money. In fact, I would actually recommend that you have a plan for extra money. I just don't want you to make a habit of spending that extra money before it actually comes to you. Build the habit of creating a game plan for any extra income that you get, and then implementing that game plan when the money actually hits your account. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to apply to just extra income. This could be your paycheck, your tips, anything that comes into you, whether it's extra or just like consistent. We don't want to spend any money before we get it. So if you're waiting for your next paycheck and it hasn't hit your account yet, but you got to purchase X, Y, and Z, your only option is to use a credit card or pull from savings. If you can, try to hold off on that until the money hits your account. So again, this doesn't just apply to extra income, but income in general. Spending money before you get it is a recipe for disaster. So there you have it. 5 toxic money habits that need to be broken as soon as possible. Otherwise, you'll always feel that impact to your bottom line. Now, silver lining, each of the habits that I shared today are 100% in your control to fix. Not saying it's going to happen overnight, right? But it starts with awareness, then being mindful, and then finding alternatives to those behaviors and sticking with those alternatives. Again, it won't change completely overnight, but you can start to form money habits that actually increase your bottom line and get you the results you deserve.